So we'll call this meeting to order, and let's do a roll call of everyone at the table, assuming if not at the table, you're not on the board, but indicate if you're a voting member, please. Tim Burton. Yes, sir.
I'm Ian McCoy. I'm critical care director.
Dave Webster. Sure.
Roger Balls, Lewis and Clark County. I'm a voting member. I'm Kevin Downs, the county attorney's office. I think Rebecca is, but she's pointing at me. So we rotate every other year.
In the agreement, it says city attorney shall serve odd numbered years,
Thank
county
you.
attorney during even number years.
That's me then. Thank you for clarifying.
Brent Colbert, Sheriff's Office, sitting in for Sheriff Dutton, who couldn't be here. Don't know if that makes me a voting member or not. Okay.
Nick Berkland, Rural Fire Council.
John Campbell, Fire City of Helena, also a voting member. Then we'll hit our folks in the gallery as well, just so we all know who's here.
Joanne Wagner, Montana Free Press.
Becky Doctor, city attorney for Helena.
Nico Hash, County Attorney's Office.
Douglas Fisher, EMS Coordinator for Helena Fire Department.
Kyle.
You, sir.
I'm Brian Copeland. I'm a community resource specialist.
Kyle Sturgill, I'm an emergency manager for Lewis and Clark County.
Great, thank you, everybody. And Stephanie Crook for Department Admin Coordinator. The minutes are recorded, so we're all online here. Sir. I am. We've got the meeting minutes from the previous meeting. Any discussion?
I've got 2 points. One, I guess I hasten to identify the document as an MOU. It's really truly an amendment to the verbiage of the agreement. And then secondly, in the minutes, it talks about St. Pete's request for subsidization. And I just want to point out that we have not made a formal request. There was some kind of high level overview discussion about what that looked like, but there was no request made.
Understood. I think when we bring your agenda item about, it's still titled MOU, we can clarify the intention of that language and consult with our attorneys about how to appropriately title it. And as far as would you propose a change to the minutes or accept as written, or what's your?
I guess I don't know that we necessarily need to change them. I just wanted to call for clarification on that. So.
I'm looking to our legal experts if we can adopt it as written and move on with the understanding that that was the nature of the conversation.
Yeah, I think that's, I'm sorry, so Nico Hash for the record, I think that works in what's being captured, I guess, in writing. So with the board's bylaws being that the recording constitutes the official record of the meeting, just the typed out portion is just, I guess, for ease of assistance if you're looking at it. But since the meeting was recorded last time, everything that was said at that is the official minute. So you essentially don't need to change the minutes. Once you've recorded it, they're already, that's done, that accurately captured exactly the entirety of the meeting. So we needed to make, if there are any additions that you want to change to how it's being retained moving forward. So if that works.
My biggest cause concern is it identifies a request for subsidy, and that I don't know that truly occurred. And even in the last meeting, I don't know that we were standing up saying, hey, we need this much to operate. So if we're going to, I guess I would advocate that maybe that be stricken from the minutes and we can change it to discussion for subsidy.
I think to Nico's point, we can change this written document because the actual minutes are the report.
Sure. Oh,
And to just add on for clarity, each agenda item, that can just say what it was proposed at that meeting, and that can just still remain the same. So even ultimately, if it was a different direction, but however it was pitched at that meeting, that can just still remain the same. So if that helps clarify.
Yeah,
we will.
Any other discussion on the minutes? Can we get a motion, please?
to accept.
Motion to accept, a second,
I'll second.
all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, minutes are accepted, thank you. Regular items, so, Mr. Webster, would you like to talk about this not an MOU amendment to performance 2.1?
Certainly, so, medical dispatch system. That emergency medical system essentially divided acuity calls between a standard and a priority, based on the dispatcher's interrogation and what information they got back and how sick or how injured the patient appeared to be via the interrogation. And so it identified the use of essentially prioritizing how resources were sent to a call. For example, a standard response is a flow of traffic because that was a low acuity patient. And then we have it in the agreement, that we have the option of deploying basic life support units, which are EMT or EMTA, EMT ambulances to those lower acuity calls. But almost as soon as the ink dried on the agreement, we changed dispatching systems. And so now we use an emergency medical dispatching system that identifies those patients as BLS yellow, which is low acuity, a BLS red, which is moderate acuity, and an ALS patient. And so the intent was to amend the verbiage in the contract to utilize the same verbiage we're currently operating on, because we're not dispatching via standard or priority anymore. And so I was really asking for a cleanup of that section of the contract that represents how we're actually practicing, our response and resource deployment. So that was the gist of it. So I put in some verbiage that just talks about using the BLS yellow, BLS red, and ALS criteria, and then dispatching our basic life support or advanced life support to those various calls. So,
Any other discussion on, and this letter was from David was in our packet.
Yes, I'd just like to bring up the way that it's originally written in the contract is a priority and a standard response. The standard response allows for a BLS unit to respond with the flow of traffic, whereas a priority response required an ALS unit to respond emergent. With this change, I understand you're proposing it be used in the way that the system was designed to be utilized. However, that will also result in a change in response levels. So with the 3 different units now, there is a non-emergent response with a BLS unit, which corresponds to the old standard response. There's still the ALS response, which will correspond to the old priority response, but the new in the middle BLS red category allows for either an ALS unit or a BLS unit to respond in emergent, which is a change from the contract as far as provision of care. Do you have any thoughts on whether that's feasible, or whether that needs to stick with an ALS response for that BLS red?
Yeah, so the short answer to that is, the intent of it being labeled as a BLS red is so we do have the option. We've looked at some of the dispatch criteria, and internally we've made some adjustments on the BLS red that we have identified should be an ALS response at least, until we're able to kind of bolster the system and get some data back. But the short story is it's not a new system. This system is actually modeled after King County, in which case they do send BLS units to yellow and reds. And then the option of a paramedic unit, once the crew establishes that there's a need for that. So in that aspect of it, we plan to model our resource deployment to parallel essentially the criteria that is set forth at this point now as well. There are not, I'll just leave it at that. We're good.
So in the past couple months, the concern that Rural Fire has had with the change in the system is that historically a paramedic has arrived on every call. Per state law, if an ALS intervention is performed on scene and a provider of a lower certification level arrives on scene afterwards, it's the responsibility of the first provider to continue patient care until they reach the hospital. That's caused some issues for our rural fire providers who are volunteer, where they can end up riding in on the ambulance because they cannot hand that off to a lower level of care. So I guess our concern on that is primarily the volunteer providers, specifically from the far out districts such as Canyon Creek, Tri-Lakes, and Wolf Creek, having to take that hour ride into the hospital and then be picked up by a crew member. It adds a pretty significant burden to their contribution as a volunteer time-wise, and also liability and commitment-wise, because they are then in charge of that patient in the ambulance. Is there any way that we could mitigate that?
Well, so I would first start by saying that, as our staffing comes on, would be extremely rare occasions when a lower level provider would be there. And as we've taken some changes to our educational role, and now have some more set in stone ways to manage their education certification level. So I feel like the incident of that happening would be extremely rare. That they would hand off to a lower level, or not hand off to a lower level, as you stated. It's not our goal ever to go to just an EMT truck. And so I feel like that is mitigation around that level of being there. The other thing is I think there's some education to do with rural fire on what interventions truly need to happen or not. Just simply starting an IV on a patient for the sole reason of starting an IV and then feeling obligated to bring that patient in is maybe not good resource utilization on that, in that circumstance either, especially when we know that IVs rarely affect outcome in most situations, especially in low to moderate acuity patients. So I think the steps that are being taken is we are taking have put in place the mechanism so that our EMTs will be at a minimum endorsed EMTs, and then we also have an advanced EMT class plan for the fall. So even when we start to deploy those trucks, there shouldn't be an occasion, when you get, because rural fire is largely firefighter, EMR, EMT with endorsements, a few A's, and a couple scattered paramedics out there. I think most of the paramedics, are pretty good about discretionary tactics. So.
Can I ask a clarifying question there? I think the state law, that's an interpretation of the law. I think who should be interpreting it in those cases should be the medical directors. So I think we've had some conversation about continuity of care and what it means to start an IV, give a stabilizing medication, and then have it a patient transported by a lower level of care, that's actually fairly common practice in a lot of places. So do we have any impression of what our medical directors are comfortable with or what direction they're providing us in those circumstances?
Well, I haven't specifically talking to Jake, who's the rural fire, but you know, when we met with Jake and Phelps, and whatever that was, you know, a while ago, I don't, I mean, they did not speak of any perceived complications. In fact, the general consensus, you know, out of that meeting is that you're better off to have an ambulance there for transport than to wait, you know, for a paramedic level ambulance to hand it off to. And so they felt comfortable taking, you know, at least receiving those patients, and of course, being general oversight for that handoff that had occurred. I don't know. I don't feel that they exhibited any consternation regarding the handoff between levels.
Yeah, maybe we can get some clarifying info on what that is.
Any other discussion from the board about our first agenda item, the non-MOU modifying performance in section 2.2?
Yeah, so real quick, I just want to go back. You mentioned that this would be an extremely rare event. If that's the case, can we set up some sort of system in association with this that would notify rural fire when there was a BLS truck that would be responding out? Is that something feasible we could do through a mass email list or something, so that the rural fire providers are aware that that is something they could encounter? Because it sounds like it is not going to be a common thing, right? It will be the exception to the rule.
No, and that would be, I would say that if it's scheduled, that's something that could, you know, we could certainly send out an email, say on this day during these hours, there's a BLS crew. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's the crew that's going to respond to the call. And that doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, the crew staffing doesn't change either direction.
Yeah.
At any given point.
So the request from Rural Fire Council was that on being dispatched to an incident, if a BLS truck is going to be responding to that incident, the ambulance contact the rural fire department on RFD1 to notify them that the BLS truck is en route.
I'm not in favor of that. That requires our ambulance crew to jump back and forth between channels. And that's how communication break down. If rural fire wants to monitor the dispatch channel, then we do have BLS designators set up through dispatch. So we do have identifiers that if it's a BLS truck, they'll identify themselves as ambulance and then their shift number.
Yeah.
So 1 through 10. And if there's a paramedic single resource, it'll identify as a paramedic. And then the medic, the ones that we're currently using, those are set aside for when there's a paramedic available for them. So when that goes out on the radio, you know, such as medic 1 responding to X incident, that identifies it as a paramedic unit. And
so most rural fire departments do monitor the EMS channel. However, the issue with that is that when most ambulance units go en route currently, they don't specify which call they're en route to, right? And so if you listen to the dispatch channel, you'll just hear medic 4 en route, ambulance 3 en route, medic 2 en route, and it's hard to determine for them which ambulance they're getting. And so I think a good alternative might be to promote the use of identifying which call each ambulance is responding to when they call en route. And I think that would probably solve the issue.
I think that's a reasonable ask. I don't know if that's part of this discussion, but
There may be another remedy integrated into SSD doing the CAD RMS update. That system, we still don't know the capacity and all the details of that update and what that will offer in terms of dispersing information to responding entities. So I can't answer that question, but there may be another fix that we're not.
I have one last item before we move on.
Is it on the agenda?
It is direct the MOU, yes, the non-MOU. So you mentioned that primarily the rural fire department is made up of EMTs with endorsements or below, which is true. However, one of the other issues that we ran into with the implementation of this is that there are a number of paramedics and nurses spread throughout the rural fire agencies. In which case, when they receive a BLS truck on scene, it makes sense for them to get in that truck and operate as a paramedic or as a nurse up to their signed off level. However, as you and I have discussed, there's some difficulties between how much equipment rural fire is expected to carry or if they're allowed to use the equipment that is already on the ambulance. Specifically, I think in this case, the question is mostly of medications and cardiac monitors.
So I go back to the discussion that if you're a paramedic level service, you should carry the paramedic tools. And not be a paramedic level service conditional on which ambulance is responding to a call. That is my personal feeling. I know we don't have an MOU that addresses that. Equipment doesn't seem to be much of a problem. But I would say that, when we look at this model being deployed in the rest of the world, BLS ambulances are BLS ambulances, and other agency paramedics are expected to have their toolboxes and their medications and operate as a paramedic, very similar to how Helena Fire does it.
I'd recommend that you take the operational discussions and address those either interagency, so we can keep moving through what's actually on our agenda. But good thoughts, good conversation. Thank you. Any other discussion from the board on the update to section 2.1 performance standard? Yes, sir.
Just for clarity, does the Rural Fire Council support these amendments that are being requested today?
I would say no, not without some modifications to do with communication of BLS units and some sort of agreement on use of supplies on the ambulance. Due to the fact that per this contract, St. Pete's is supposed to provide a specific level of care, and due to the dropping of that level of care, the rural firefighters, who are all volunteer, have been asked to provide a significantly increased amount of time and commitment to their jobs, as well as if we purchase our own equipment, we're looking at tens of thousands of dollars per department to outfit to that paramedic level.
So I think we're still talking about operational stuff. This change in verbiage to the contract really does not change practice. The standard is ill-defined, priority is ill-defined. So there really isn't anything that prohibits us from practicing, the deployment model now. And I think before we get too far into the weeds on operational stuff, I think we should focus on the change in the verbiage, and then if we need to, like Chief Campbell mentioned, that stuff that we can sort out.
As I pointed out, that BLS red category is an implicit change as we adopt the new language.
But not every board member has to agree with this board on every topic either. So any other discussion on this item?
Yes,
Yes,
please.
sir.
Okay, so just for clarity, the Rural Fire Council does not support the amendments that are being requested right now.
We support the change in language,
You do support the change.
but not in response of BLS units to BLS red calls.
Okay, I'm trying to be respectful of everybody's point of view here. So the request before us is the change to the verbiage.
Correct, which has an implicit change to the response.
Okay, so the request before us today is to approve these amendments. I'm sorry to be so repetitive. Does the Rural Fire Council indeed support the action that's being requested today in this meeting?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So hearing that, fellow board members, do we have an opportunity to keep discussing this? I would like to hear that our Rural Fire Council does support the amendments that are being presented today. How do we get there from where we are right now is what's on my mind. Thank you.
So before I go too far, I would like to point out that there are no BLS units scheduled on this current and the next 6 week schedule. So I feel like we're hashing stuff that is a very minor and rare occurrence. And while I don't disagree that there's more education that can be done to the rural fire community, the change in verbiage, I'm not sure I agree with that statement that rural fire does not support it. And maybe Kyle can jump in here, but the conversations I have had, and I know that you're representing rural fire, the conversations I have had are in support of aligning ourselves with the current dispatch practice.
Geez, I think, so I guess my clarifying question was, is there language that could be changed to what's, I mean, I'm looking at this, I think we're talking about this language that's in italics in the packet. And is there a suggested language change that rural fire district could get on board with that would, line up with what's being proposed? And I don't necessarily think we can maybe get there today, but it sounds like there's some language that maybe there's some middle ground here.
Yeah, so the specific language that I think we would be totally in acceptance of is where it says BLS red, BLS units respond with lights and sirens. Per the previous protocol, that would have required a paramedic unit respond with lights and sirens. The way this system is designed is as it is written in the non-MOU here. That being said, we as Rural Fire are looking for a couple more things to be hashed out before we are in support of this. If we were to change the BLS red means in a paramedic unit responds with lights and sirens, that would be acceptable to Rural Fire.
See that again for me, sorry about that sentence.
If we changed the line here where it says a BLS red response means BLS units respond with lights and sirens, to BLS red means an ALS unit, a paramedic unit responds with lights and sirens. That would be acceptable to Rural Fire.
Do you have any idea how often this actually happens where they come in? The volunteer paramedic comes in.
Right in. I can say from personal experience that I've done it 3 times since early February, which is when BLS trucks first started to respond.
Do you know how often it's happened in the last 6 to 12 weeks?
How often they've responded in?
Correct.
I do not.
We have changed our staffing model.
Yeah.
So we don't have BLS trucks anymore. That was a priority for us.
Yeah, but I will say, like looking down the road, right, as it becomes unsustainable to put paramedics on every truck, there needs to be the ability to adapt to moderate acuity calls. I will tell you that statistically, BLS Reds do not need a paramedic assigned to them, almost never. As do BLS Yellows. And so if we continue with the verbiage that says, we assign a paramedic to every BLS Red, we lose a lot of functionality out of the system and a lot of adaptability out of the system. And we do essentially what we see what's happening across the state is both municipalities and companies canceling contracts because there's such rigid standards that they're not able to adhere to them. And so I think, as the role of paramedics change, as systems change, as ambulances change, as staffing levels change, that there's a constant flux. I'm really hesitant to lose flexibility and adaptability when it seems to not affect patient care outcomes. You're requesting something because you want something, not because it makes a difference.
I am in absolute agreement with you that this model with BLS trucks responding to BLS red calls is absolutely the way of the future and is very well proven to be effective. However, I would just like some language added in there or some sort of agreement, particularly with the communication of when rural fire is receiving a BLS truck and the use of supplies that are on the ambulance prior to rural fire.
And I think that's perfectly doable outside of this discussion right here. Yeah.
Any other discussion? Any public commentary?
Just add really quickly, I know it's not public comment, but in the proposed italics in the second sentence, it says the ambulance company and may utilize basic life support. Just gonna note, I'm sure that and was probably that can just go away. Just kind of want to make note of that before it gets incorporated into the contract, should it will proceed forward.
Thank you.
And Chief, can you remind us how long this agreement's been in front of the board?
The termination of this contract is May 1, 2027. And it was originated roughly 4 years ago.
Yeah, the conversation itself to update it, has it been before us for about a year?
Over a year.
Yeah.
That's my point.
Yes. I'll also point out, is there any public commentary? Anybody else would like to comment? Also point out 2.4 in the contract deals with the ambulance companies providing sufficient EMTs and paramedics. It doesn't put a number on those, and I think that's by design to what Webster is already discussing. This isn't just a Helena unique problem. There is a national shortage of individuals having these qualifications, pursuing careers and even part-time work in these fields. I think that is to me, one of the underlying aspects of this contract is we have to be nimble enough to allow our sole ambulance provider the ability to provide the service. So with that said, I'll say I'll be in support of this change. Any other discussion?
Just my same question. It's not clear to me that the response you got was satisfactory to the fire council. If it is, could you clarify that for me one way?
So to go a bit further, I will not be in support. I have, from the day after the BLS trucks went in effect, attempted to get clarification on communication on responses and have talked with both Dave and Ann about communication and the use of supplies on the trucks. And I have not yet gotten a satisfactory answer. That was from mid-February. So that is why I will not be in support of it.
So
because I don't foresee that happening in the near future unless it is part of this MOU.
Thanks for speaking to it. Just as a single board member, I would love for us as a board to arrive at a conclusion that is agreeable to the provider and also to the rural fire council, and we don't appear to be there based on what I just heard.
So you want to practice as a paramedic, but you want them to bring the supplies for you to use?
So historically, rural fire has assisted the paramedic that arrives on St. Pete's. It is not until this change in response level where we've started receiving BLS trucks that we have come to this strange spot where we have licensed paramedics who are licensed to provide paramedic level care and have in the past using St. Pete's equipment. The only difference now is that there is no St. Pete's employed paramedic on scene. And a lot of these paramedics are employees of St. Pete's, but they are not on the clock for St. Pete's. They are with the rural fire department.
That's the big concern though, as we're talking about how it's been done in the past. And we need to kind of focus on what the practice is currently and our ability to continue to provide.
And those operational considerations aren't governed by this agreement. framework under which the ambulance company operates is within the agreement. The nuance of operations can be wildly complicated. And I would say, rural council appreciated to be on the board and weigh in. They are a vote. So my recommendation would be that we have a motion and vote on it and get our direction from the board as a whole.
I guess to start, is the language that you think needs to be in there, is it a drastic change from what is actually? I mean, I guess I'm not clear what's been proposed. The first sentence is the same, the italics, first sentence is exactly the same as what's already in the agreement. It's the second sentence. So without knowing the nuance and the all that happens when people are responding on this, I don't know, the nuance of that. But as far as the language in here, is there a minor change that's like add this or take this out? That we could all, I mean, I would agree with Roger. It'd be nice if everybody like, there's a middle ground here.
I feel that minor change, which as I understand it, we're asking to put paramedic level response into BLS red. So that minor verbiage changes resource deployment. And that's where we get into the weeds a little bit.
Okay.
So a reasonable ask is a paramedic on ALS calls. That's absolutely intuitive. The way they classify BLS reds, most of those do not require a paramedic level response. There are not immediate life-threatening issues associated with the response from the interrogation in that classification. So when you talk about paramedics being a limited resource, that pulls, that could easily tie up a paramedic from responding to an ALS call where that level of intervention is necessary.
And that's a challenge across, not just here, but everywhere.
67% of services have had to change their staffing and deployment models last year across the nation.
If we made that substantive change to what's proposed, it would require paramedic on ALS and BLS red. What has been originally proposed is EMT or AMT on BLS yellow and BLS red. To Webster's point, I have experienced this in another agency as well, where that BLS red is a broad and large volume of the overall EMS call typing, and they do not all require that ALS intervention. If we make that change as proposed from Rural Fire Council, we could be painting the ambulance company into a corner that we can't get out of, because we don't know what the national trends for paramedic level providers is going to be months from now, years from now. And this contract needs to continue to be in place for at least 3 years.
If I could just additionally put this into perspective, on any given month, we average 255 BLS calls, and we average 11 ALS calls where paramedic intervention was needed. So you're sending paramedics to a whole lot of calls where they're not necessarily needed.
So this MOU's been in front of the board for years, so I think we've had plenty of time to work out the details. I'm not interested in approving a document that substantially requires a staffing pattern that's not achievable, particularly on today's climate. So how do we get from here to there by approving this agreement today?
I think the proposal from the ambulance company puts us in the ability to have the latitude for them to staff to meet the needs of the ambulance service area.
What I don't want to do is not approve this agreement today and then come back next year and still not have an approved agreement. A year's plenty of time.
So we'll make a proposal here. I would be willing to move forward and vote for this as long as we have a definite commitment from the ambulance, St. Peter's Health, to address the two concerns of communication of BLS calls and using equipment. I don't necessarily mean that we have to come to the same conclusion, but I would like a time frame that we can meet, sit down as a group, and come to some resolution on those two topics, with a definitive date on that.
So the communication stuff is, as I understand, you're just proposing the identifiers that we've already discussed with dispatch. They're already built in the system. We just haven't rolled them out because it's just such a rapidly changing environment. Is to identify which call you're en route to, right?
Yep.
So medical en route to 221 Breckenridge.
Yep.
That's an easy fix.
Okay.
The other one, which you had, sorry, Nick, you'll have to.
Yeah,
What was the other
the use of
contention?
supplies on the ambulance.
Yeah, the use of supplies, I feel like is less of an issue as well. The tricky part is the medications. And so if we separate those two out, then it's fairly straightforward, but medications, at this point is a hard stop for us.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm not really sure if I'm at the table or off the table, but I don't know when I'm allowed to speak, so I think, I am doing staffing right now, and so I think the other commitment is, you know, if I identify a time where there will be a BLS truck assigned, which I don't, we're all ALS right now, I would reach out and we can start having that discussion of what that looks like with our current EMR and the switch and going through, IMH, who is our parent holder of our EMR, that documentation and the legal piece of that becomes a little tricky. So if we should identify a time where a BLS truck will be deployed to the city, I will let you know.
Okay.
As well.
Could we set up a meeting with the two of you and Jake Williams and Jared Phelps with Rural Fire Council to discuss medications further?
Mhm.
Any additional discussion? Does anyone want to hazard a motion?
I'm gonna move approval of the amendment to the at least the ambulance service agreement. With future discussions to take place with St. Pete's and Rural Fire on operational issues as scheduled in the near term.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion before we vote?
I think what Mr. Hash over here said, that there's that and, that errant and in there, I think that needs to be taken out.
And Mr. Manager agreed, okay, so his motion is amended to minus the and. Any other discussion? All in favor, show of hands. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously, thank you. Nominations for vice president of the board. This came up through our bylaw draft. So we need to have this established for our bylaws to be effective. Any discussion?
Is there a tradition?
You know, one of the oldest versions of this I found, the standing vice president went to the sheriff's office. But that is not in the current or the proposed revision to the.
And
Who's
is there a tradition on the chair position?
The fire chief is the chair in the current revision. Come on. Who's not here? That's usually who gets nominated.
For the board purpose, I understand that, and there's a lot of times that the sheriff is not going to be here, so he is the board member. can he have somebody sit in his place being the vice president?
I believe that's how the bylaws are organized. It is the sheriff or his designee.
Yes, I would say that would be the way to go then.
Is that an official nomination?
Yes.
No.
Any discussion?
Because it's probably gonna be me.
Any public commentary? All in favor of the sheriff or his designee filling the role of vice chair? Show of hands. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. Consider revision to the bylaws to adhere to public meeting requirements. The draft was included in your packets. Hopefully everyone was sufficiently comfortable. That draft was also included in last year's packet. So now we're hoping to finalize our bylaw adoption. Any discussion on bylaws management?
Just a question for the city attorney and the county attorney. Have your staffs reviewed this and concur with its approval?
Yeah, has there been any changes from the proposal from last year to what this is? No, I just noted about who's gonna be keeping the records. I think at one point I had a proposal where it's gonna be maybe the city of Helena. And on this proposal, it's got fire. That's been the one who's keeping all the records. I just wanted to bring that up.
You mean as a repository or as an act or as an activity?
So this is the bottom of Article 3. Says Helena City Fire Department will be keeping the recordings of the meeting, creating the written record.
Page 3.
Kind of being the repository for all of those records. That was kind of just the one change that I noticed. I just wanted to make sure that was understood. Certainly from my perspective, that was.
Just a question. I believe with our upgraded system and the fact that recorded technology is going to be the minutes in the record, that automatically the clerk's office has it and thereby the fire department does as well. Is that your understanding?
I think that's accurate. Do you know how this change was made?
Stephanie?
The change was discussed because if it was written as the city commissioner or the city clerk's office, they would have to be present at every meeting to take the minutes. This puts the onus on us and therefore me to do that written record and make the recording, and then it is then stored in the clerk's office.
Mr. Chairman, I think that clear.
Any other discussion? Any public commentary? I'll entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? None. Approved. Hands. Against. Passes unanimous. And
Unanimous.
Thank you. That's good job. Any discussion from board communications or proposals for next agenda item? I just throw out there the ambulance report, maybe from 2023, and I know we failed to give you adequate notice for this meeting. Would you be comfortable emailing that to the board members and then anticipate next year's meeting? Now that our bylaws are firmed up, we'll be looking at April and hopefully do the ambulance board report as a standing agenda for the next meeting.
Yeah, is it okay if I just send it to you as the chairperson?
Yeah, we can disseminate.
Yeah, I'll certainly get that done, and then would it be possible to pick a date today at this meeting, so get it on our calendar?
For the next EMS board meeting, the bylaws stipulate in April, so we'll get something sent out via Outlook so that it makes logical sense for the calendar. That's all right. Anything else? Any final public commentary?
just a question, Mr. Chair. Since I can now foresee the future, can I get added to your email list?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Can we get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Aye. We're done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next year it'll be me.
Yeah.
There was- a year ago. Yeah, that was last year, that's why. Yeah, exactly. In fact, I went, wait, it's
Third
May.
Tuesday.
I had to admit.
Go ahead.
Last year, so I guess maybe it's me, I better check. Oh, that was last year. Yes.
You know,
That's what I'm talking about. The milestone thing I'll pass.
Yep, Sam.
And then
Relay.
you have to.